So first of all, thank you to BMC Helix for having me here. It's not often as an analyst that I get to have so many different customers in the room with, different levels of maturity and have an opportunity to kind of bring the Forrester research into the conversation. So thank you to BMC Helix, and thank you to all of you for your time here today. Probably doesn't surprise any of you that the IT landscape is changing quickly. I mean, I've been in this business for a long time, and I can't ever remember the pace of change being like what we have seen over the last 2 years. It is dramatically different. And because of that, there are lots of things that we have to focus on in a very different light than what we've done up till now. And the struggle to adapt is real. I hear it. Conversations that we had last night, right? We have this public-facing kind of wave of information that's going to everyone about what's happening with AI. My husband is a high school Spanish teacher, and it's hit his classroom, right? And he's coming to me with questions about what is this AI and how can I leverage this? And I'm like, dude, you can't even use your phone. Don't even start with AI. I mean, it's just not going to happen. But the struggle to adapt is real. We don't know what's the best path forward. There isn't guidance for this, right? We might, as analysts, say, hey, we're trying to figure this out and navigate it just as much as you are. And so we're trying to develop models that will help guide you and develop new principles and guidelines to help you. But the struggle is real. Now, Forrester came out with a new line of research, I think it was last year or the year before, around high performance IT. And one of the things that I am certain about is that the impact for this is really amplifying business results, right? If we start focusing on AI as something to enable us to do our work better, we're really kind of focused in the wrong area. This is an amplifying, when you start looking at 2x times our productivity, these are not insignificant changes to organizations. These are transformational changes. And it's changing pretty much everything. Our models, our methods, our metrics. I'm going to dance around a topic here because I'm not really supposed to be publicly talking about the wave results. I'm in the middle of it, just submitted it before I got on a plane to come out here. But I am impressed with what BMC Helix is trying to do around measurement. I attend a lot of the competitor events, and I'm absolutely shocked how often we are not talking about measuring value. If you're going to try to convince your leadership and your executives that this is worth doing, we have to be able to quantify that. Why not focus that same technology on measuring the outcomes of what this is providing to organization? But our metrics are going to have to change. Our skills are going to have to change, as well as the technology. Trust is at the core. And I can tell you that there is a big difference between what we're doing in the US and what's happening in Europe. In Europe, there is a lot less trust for what's going on. You have to prove that your systems have the right level of security, that have the right policies in place to protect data. In the US, we're kind of flying by the seat of our pants. There are certain industries that are much more concerned about data privacy than others. But we're seeing transformation that we're not seeing in Europe because those guide rails are not as strong. So kind of keep that as a thought here as we go forward. But trust really has to be part of what we're doing in this transformation. It needs to be every step along the way. Can we trust our data? Can we trust the systems? Now, this is not a technology provider's problem. This is your problem. You can't, with any of these technologies, think that they're going to solve this trust problem for you. You have to be very concerned about it, and as well developing the right models and practices to help your organization confirm that trust. So some steps to success. I would say the first thing is establishing that trust infrastructure. As we start looking at these technologies, you very quickly find that the data that underlies, what we're feeding an LLM model is not quite the quality that you need your data to be in. So even though you may be on the cutting edge and starting to adopt these technologies, you're not getting the benefit from them. You're seeing more hallucinations. There's less trust there. So if you start off by building the right foundation and having the right knowledge, that enables your organization to trust the results that are coming from the LLM systems. So that trust has to go at the data level first. We have a new model within Forrester to kind of demonstrate this. But trust has to be at the foundation of what you're doing as you move forward. We want to progress our AI decision making. So we can start in very small areas that don't have an impact to the business, right? We certainly wouldn't want to begin rolling out these technologies in a business-facing capacity until we can trust it internally that we're getting the right results. As we're moving towards more autonomous AI, the decision making will be in a very narrow area, agentic based. So we'll have 1 or 2 agents that can be powered to make those decisions. When we get good results and we can trust those results consistently, then we can begin to expand that decision making. We have to invest in AI literacy programs. The conversation earlier about what happens to these people that are doing these rote behaviors. It is really up to leadership's responsibility to begin thinking about career pathing. It's not too soon. In fact, I would say you're probably behind the ball if you're just now beginning to think about what will we do with these resources. But I think the example that you gave, right? We have these programmers over here and we're gonna put them out in the field. Right, that's thinking ahead of time. We're getting these cost savings, we're saving time of our people, but these are people that know our business, that know the rest of our business and can connect with them. Putting them out in the field, connecting them with customers is a great opportunity. So we need to be cognizant of that. Operations has a lot of people. And the rote behaviors are generally where we have people that are onboarding into our company, right? So they're very early on in their careers. We're able to bring them on board, kind of bring them up to an understanding of our company. What happens when that goes away and you don't have that onboarding capability? You're going to be recruiting more senior people in the industry. Where do they pick up those baseline skills? We may end up having to build little mini universities in our environment that get them from when they come out of school to getting them up to a level of professionalism where they can provide value. I don't know what the answers are, but we clearly have to be focused on improving AI literacy across our staff. We want continuous learning systems. We've been attempting to do continuous learning for a long time, right? Always iterative improvements, use our data. This is going to be so much more impactful. But it'll be continuous learning systems across the enterprise. We are going to see all those data silos break down, right? It used to be, that's your data, this is my data, I can only really make decisions from over here. But as we begin using technologies like RAG, being able to go and search across multiple repositories, our decision making is going to be so much more impactful when we can see something from the customer through to operations, all the way out to development, right? That kind of visibility is really going to help organizations to drive continuous learning in new ways. We also need governance frameworks, and I don't think we're nearly there yet with governance frameworks, right? We're kind of at the early stages. We've had these governance frameworks, things like ISO 20000, that have existed for a very long time, but predominantly based off of command and control structures, which pretty much dissipate with what we're doing here with technology. So we're going to need new governance frameworks, and they have to be adaptive. Because I'm pretty sure it doesn't matter what we do today, it's going to change in 6 months. That's the pace of what we're doing. So if we're not thinking about a governance structure that can adapt, then we're probably headed down the wrong path because it's going to be out of date quite quickly. And we need measurement frameworks to understand the effect of what we're doing. And there's an important thing that kind of came up when you were talking, Ryan, about the measurement and the productivity gains. Just because we gain time back, like I saved 3 minutes on a phone call, right? That doesn't mean that 3 minutes turns into productivity. We are talking about staff that have been doing more with less for decades. They are burned out, literally burned out. So when you start thinking about cost savings around productivity, that doesn't naturally turn into, oh, well, we can go over here and do all this project work. Maybe we might want to think for just a second to let those people breathe, right? Because I've done this job, I've been in operations, I know what it's like to do more with less. And the narrative right now is, we're going to do more with less. Tell me, can your people actually do more? Can they? Think about that. Are we asking too much from our people? It's going to make their jobs easier. Yes, it's going to take away some of that rote behavior, but maybe it's providing the space for people to be creative again. Instead of being so reactionary, maybe they can start thinking about doing things proactively. But there is only so much that a human body can take and be 100% into their job on an 8-hour basis. They're going to need time to breathe. We need strategic partnerships with vendors. I will tell you, I was incredibly impressed going through the wave cycle and talking to customers, especially from BMC Helix, about those partnerships, the things that I see when I've been at the cab in Sonoma and have been here. These are meaningful meetings where you guys have an opportunity to speak to your vendor, a critical vendor in your environment, and you're getting transparency back. This is where we are in our journey. This is how we want to help you. Those partnerships aren't just valuable to them, they're valuable to you. You're getting answers, you're understanding exactly where the product is going and where you might be able to advance it within your organization. I highly encourage Forrester clients that, look, pick a partner, pick a vendor that you're working with. The closer you partner with them, the better the results that you're going to get, because it's changing so quickly. If you think you're going to get something off the shelf and it's immediately going to make a difference, you're headed down the wrong path. These are the best use cases are when you have an LLM that's trained to your data. That's when you get decisions that are meaningful in your environment. So, we want these really strong partnerships with the vendors in order to get the greatest value add from the technology. And I highly recommend that clients also start their own innovation labs. If you've got the literacy program in place and your people are learning the skills that they need to understand these technologies, then they are the most likely to be the thought leaders in your organization about how you can use these technologies in new ways. Not just the ones that you're buying from vendors, but the use cases that are very specific to your environment. Being able to try these things out. The ideas that are the best, that have the greatest transformation potential, those are the ones that get funded by the business. But having that experimental mindset within the organization is vastly critical to this pace of change that we're seeing. Now, I have some use cases here to go through. From this point forward, I've pretty much got Forrester research to show you, things that I've been working on. So any comments or feedback that you guys have, any areas that you want to dig into in more depth, just let me know. But the first thing is some new models. Now, this is our technology operations model. It came out about 3 months ago, I think now. But notice at the center of this, we used to have DevOps, right? That we were constantly talking about development and ops needing to come together. That was completely replaced by this listen, learn, and adapt. That's what we're going to be doing all the time. within operations is constantly listening to what's going on, whether it's through observation or observability platforms or our monitoring systems. We need to be able to learn from what we're gathering and then adapting from there. It's a perpetual cycle that will be driven by our agentic systems. And oh, by the way, if you're a Forrester client, you can just snap up. I made it easy for you to find the research that these models are attached to. The next one, and this one just came out. I got a notification yesterday, so I took the little red X off of the QR code. But this is our adaptive autonomous operations model. And again, notice how trust is built in to every layer. You will not move from reactive to proactive in a meaningful way unless you can trust your data, right? That's just a predecessor. Organizations that have had really solid knowledge management practices and can point to their knowledge and say, this works, we're getting success today using this knowledge. You put that into an LLM and surface that type of data, you get much better results than you do with a knowledge management practice that hasn't had that attention over the last few years. Then as you're moving up, if you want to get to more prescriptive operations, there's an operational trust barrier, right? Our people have to believe that this is going to be effective. Our organization as a whole has to be able to see the value. That's where the metrics and things that can prove that value will help to overcome that. We had a conversation at dinner last night where we were talking about how the general population have this view of what's trustworthy within agentic AI. And there's great concern about training models on your data or on a public model, right? And so there's the public-facing view of that, and then there's what we know about how to leverage these models. We're confronted with that, though. Whether it's misinformation or not, right? The concerns are there. That organizational trust barrier, you never move forward unless you get the buy-in from executives, that this is a path forward that we can take, and they have the confidence that you can do so and have the right governance in place to protect the company's interests. Of course, as you move forward into autonomous operations, there's systemic trust, and then moving into a complete self-evolving operations, there's a strategic trust barrier. So again, this has just been released, but this is my attempt to begin putting some models around this rapidly changing environment. Now this one is the one that I've kind of anchored myself in because I've been beginning to see the roots of this take place in organizations. Like I had a call with a client just before I came here where they were phasing out all phone support by the end of the year. You don't take a risk like that, phasing out all phone support, if you don't have the right pieces in place. And I want you to think about why we have phone support, right? We have relied on this model for at least 30 years. You have an issue, you call in. It started off in call centers, then we had help desks, and then we transformed into service desks. That model was based on what? The customer knew there was a problem, but we didn't. So of course, we needed them to call in to us to tell us about it so that we could begin troubleshooting it for them. We're headed to a world where we're already going to know more about what's happening on that device than the end user does. So why do we need them to call us? Right? That model just, it shreds in this new environment. I'm not saying we take people-to-people contact away. I'm saying that method of queuing on a phone, pushing little buttons, getting to somebody, creating a ticket sits in a queue, maybe it gets resolved today, maybe tomorrow, that goes away. But something like an expert bar, that's a fantastic replacement. Geez, bring your laptop up, let's have a conversation, let's talk about it, let's improve your usability of the technology. But we're probably not going to be doing a lot of troubleshooting in those meetings, right? Because we'll already know, oh, you've got too many windows open on Chrome. We're going to close a couple of those windows that have been inactive. Or we'll call you. We notice you have a problem. Imagine a world that's like that. Will our customers still be complaining they don't have a phone to call if we've got that level of proactivity in the way that we're providing services? Now, I can't say that this is going to happen overnight. I can't say it's going to happen in 6 months or 6 years. But I can see this future of where we're headed. And this is why we have to rethink how we have structured our operational environment and how we view that customer interface. This is a unified customer interface where technology is unifying everything into something like Teams. It's happening very quickly. All right, next up is, any questions on any of that? Any comments? Does that scare you?
Just a quick one. What it stands for in the diagram?
UEM?
It's digital experience, but UEM?
Wouldn't you know, you'd ask me something, I drew a blank. Unified Endpoint Management.
Okay.
Sorry. That's another analyst's research area. Okay. Oh, and just a little bit on the skills with this one. Notice that we no longer have generalists here, right? And the only way that we're going to provide value if we are interacting directly with a customer is using intelligent swarming, something like the ops swarmer, right? Finding the right person immediately so that we optimize that resolution path. This is a vastly different model. It's not just the customer interface. Tickets are automatically created and populated with all the knowledge that we're going to need as a support person to resolve that. We'll already have that data gathered. It'll be in the ticket, the record system itself. Different skill sets. All right, let's look at the methods. So one of the things, and this is a research report that I'm working on right now, is around the product centricity. And if you look at product management, right, these are autonomous teams that own the outcome of a product. We can begin applying these concepts within IT operations around the service desk, for example, right? Product centricity means we have a dedicated set of staff. They are responsible for that outcome. They have a lot of autonomy on how they work. That's not typically what we've done within the service desk. We've given them a rigid set. This is your incident management process. Everything goes in a ticket, right? We've had to really create consistency by applying practice and process and measuring it in order to understand how effective that is. But in the new world, we're gonna, what's coming in are things that we haven't seen before. Things that we may not know how those resolutions take place. Process isn't necessarily the way to handle it. We're not talking about volume, we're talking about exceptions. And so we want a team that is empowered to be able to make decisions and to take action based upon whatever's coming into their environment. So a product centricity is going to be incredibly important. At the core of what we're doing has to be centered around employee experience. Every application of the technology needs to provide a better experience than what they have today. If it's not, we're going in the wrong direction, right? We should be making things pain-free. Customers should not feel like this is a burden to get a hold of somebody or that their technology is getting in the way of them doing their jobs. We want better employee experience, being able to do things through chat instead of going to 5 or 6 different systems, right? A unified entry point. That makes it pain-free. Personalized. So you know who I am, I'm in IT. Maybe your responses to what I'm typing in a chat might be more technical than maybe somebody who's working in HR, right? That context is so incredibly important to the responses that you get from a system. We are now able to understand that context in ways that we couldn't before.
Hey, Julie.
Yes?
Just, somewhat related, but we're noticing that the part of the organization that was managing teams that now more often are called the workplace productivity team, like they were kind of tasked, like we're gonna go look at co-pilots on teams, and they looked at that team like, okay, you're gonna own this initiative. But they're not coming from like the service management team or the ops team, and they don't have as much of a background as what could be the impact of building 100, letting everybody build their own agent studio or Copilot studio solutions. Do you see that happening? Like, does that make sense?
I'm living it out in my job,
Yeah.
right? Obviously we have Copilot and we've purchased it within Forrester. We have business users on it, and then we have our analysts, right? We're testing and using these products in vastly different ways. Just the way that you write a prompt, if you look at how an end user would write a prompt and how somebody who's had programming background might write it, I can get vastly different results by using my prompts than they're getting from their prompts. We have one, I created one for non-participating vendors, so that it could go out and find information for me, give me the links and the sources so that I can go and do my investigation, right? Because the vendor is not giving me the information, I've got to go find it. They're still in the wave. We've been sharing these with other parts of the company just to see, is this something that we want to use as a whole, as an organization? Other teams were creating them, and she goes, how did you get it to give you the links? And I'm like, well, that's not really rocket science. You ask it to give you the links, right? I mean, there's a vast difference between the people that are owning that Copilot on the business side and their effectiveness between what we see with the analysts who are much more familiar with writing those prompts. But again, that's an easy thing to solve if we get people the right training. Everybody right now should have prompt engineering training. It's how you get the most effective use of these new technologies. You can't assume that just because it's in plain English that they're going to be able to create a prompt that's meaningful and gives them consistent results. But these are, the challenges that we're facing is who owns it and.
That's right. Are the product managers going to be in that group now? Is it going to be centralized or?
Yep.
Thanks.
But like I said, very important that whatever decisions you're making with this, that they drive a better experience for your employees. That should be at, I recommend doing journey mapping. So you look at a particular process in your environment and you start saying, okay, where can we apply agentic AI or an LLM for decision making? Apply it in a way where it's pointed at like a bottleneck or someplace that's not working very well, and measure the results. If you're getting the results, then that means, okay, we're doing the right thing. If we're not getting the results, we're probably creating more frustration for the end users. So again, be very careful on the way that you apply it across the enterprise. And it's not my area of research, it's a colleague's of mine, but we've been having a lot of conversations about the connection between AI ops and service management. It's my personal opinion that we should own as much data as we can from a service management perspective. If I have to constantly go out and ask the owners of a Splunk system, hey, can I access the log files? It inevitably happens when an outage occurs. You get a whole bunch of people on a call, and we're starting to look at log files to figure if we can figure out what was the chain of events that occurred before X happened, right? Well, I don't own the Splunk data, but somebody on the team needs to get on the call that can provide us access to the Splunk data, right? That's a process that we need to avoid now. If I can have that data automatically pulled into my root cause analysis, right? That's a benefit to us. We don't, all that time spent getting access to this data, bringing the right people on board, the more that we can have access to, not just through APIs, but also on board in the platform, the better off we're going to be. The more real-time decisions we're going to be able to make without having to worry about tying into all these systems. Service management was meant to help us manage complexity. It was not meant to add to that complexity. And I look at some of these systems today, and they are so incredibly complex, interconnections with all these different platforms. That's not helping us to manage the environment. The more we can simplify it, the better off we're going to be in the long run. This is that experience map. It's a sample one from incident management. But looking at, okay, this is the customer journey. This is what's, okay for them, and this is where we're creating pain points. How can we start to eliminate these things from happening in that customer experience? Where can we apply technology to improve that experience? All right, metrics. Again, another report that was at the beginning of the year, but we're recommending 4 metric archetypes. One is operational health. We never get away from measurements like availability, right? Even as poor of a metric as it is, it's still a measurement that our business understands. The system is up and running, it's available. So we still need that operational health. But we really need to pivot more towards service dashboards. And of course, BMC Helix has a service dashboard. You'd be surprised how many of these products in the market space don't. But being able to look at a service end to end is going to be more important now because of all the agentic AI that we're adding to that. We should see improved service delivery and be able to quantify it in service delivery outcomes for the business. It can't be in component uptime, right? That does not translate to value with this new world. The other thing that we recommend is a metric map. As you're going through this, you identify a pain point. You should have metrics that show that transformation, that help you understand where you are today and the gradual transformation that's happening. All too often, we have outcome-based metrics that we want to achieve, but it takes 2 years to get there. So we're not seeing a positive impact in the environment, and we're going to end up shifting our path. So a metric map is really about what are the early signs that the transformation is happening, what will we see before we get to those outcome-based metrics. Now this is an example of a service dashboard, and then using some help from the BMC Helix dashboard for the agentic, I came up with an agentic AI dashboard. Now, this is a hypothetical, but I think it's something that all of you should be thinking about. How can you measure the value of what you're doing with agentic AI? It certainly cannot just be productivity metrics. I really have a strong concern that feeds into that do more with less narrative that we have had for a very long time, and that we have to be able to quantify this in different ways. Consistency is something that we get from an AI agent, right? So we may have been asking our people to complete a ticket, a record in a system for a long time. We don't always get consistency, right? Sometimes we get just fixed. They've ticked the box, but they haven't really done their job. They're off doing something else. With an AI agentic agent, we say, populate the solution with the steps that we're taking. We're going to get that result every time. It doesn't mean it's 100% accurate, but that box is filled with the sequence of events that happen. Consistency is really important. If we're not documenting it, we can't learn from it. We can't use that as a feedback loop. So consistency is something that we should be focusing on from a measurement perspective. Obviously, productivity gains are going to be there. Cost impact is going to be there. Demand. I think we should be tracking how much demand we're having for the agentic AI in the environment. What's that demand look like? How is it increasing, decreasing? What parts of the business are doing that the most? Because we'll understand better where we should apply our efforts to continuously improve. If we have a particular business unit that gets a lot of value from agentic AI, coming up with more use cases to help them to be successful. So understanding where it's being adopted and how well it's being adopted. And there are some new metrics that I introduced in the agentic, the AI-centric service desk model. One is called no contact resolution. So that means there was no human involved and the resolution took place. So maybe we sensed an anomaly, came up with a recommendation, and applied that recommendation and prevented an outage from happening. Now today, that would not result in a ticket, right? We would not have triggered some sort of a ticket creation because it happened proactively. But we should be tracking those things because that's a value add of applying these technologies in the environment. Maybe we need a new ticket type, like a recommendation, or I don't know. Got to come up with something there where we're tracking the loop of auto resolutions, because that's value add. The next one, so if an end user does come into that second lane that you saw in the AI-centric service desk model, that is low contact resolution. So the human is in the loop, but they're working predominantly with technology, whether it's a voice virtual agent, or it's some sort of a sensing device that's occurring, that's gathering information that can help us auto-resolve. So now we're distinguishing a very popular metric that our business understands, first contact resolution, and we're dividing it up into 3. No contact, low contact, and then what we would have when it comes in traditionally to the service desk. That, again, will help us to track the progress of shifting it from human effort into the different layers of the technology. And the more effective we get, the more that will transfer to the 2 earlier layers. So those are the types of...
We're going through like what the drill down screen would be for Employee Navigator, and we're struggling with the same thing, and we're also thinking like, once this stuff gets really good, it's going to drive way more conversations that don't turn into tickets, and how do you track the value of that? So I love that approach.
Yeah, and I think we have to have something like an anomaly, that we track anomalies in the environment. These are blips. They're not quite events. They're not significant enough for us to trigger an event process, but there's something that, that's happening in the environment. I've been working on that and trying to come up with the right name for the type of category, but it still needs to be tracked in some meaningful way so that we can prove the value.
But from change management point of view, it's very important, because we cannot go and apply those changes from the recommendation which is coming from agentic AI. So change management is very, very important. What is a missing link in the whole AI journey, what we have been seeing for last 1 year, is the change management. Because for non-service impacting, yes. But if it's a service impacting, no, operation won't allow.
So what I focused on in the wave, which I consider to be the early returns for agentic AI and change management, is the enhanced risk assessment. To me, the ability to connect the dots between different risk factors, which are both human, whether human, process, system, judgment, there's a whole bunch that goes into that. And the more successful we get at understanding risk, the more likely we are to get the outcome that we're looking for from an implemented change. So yes, I agree with you that change management is a caution area that we definitely are not quite ready to turn over, automatically allowing a system to make changes in the environment, but we get there by assuring that we can better understand the risk. And that comes from better quality data that we're capturing about when things happen, what those repairs are, what the fixes are, how successful those are. That repeated history will help to improve the decision-making capability within change management. But that's definitely at that systemic risk level. That's not at the data level. Just because we've got good data doesn't mean we automatically turn it over to, for change management to be managed by agentic AI. We'll get there, but that's going to be one of the processes I'm sure we're going to need a lot more governance around before we can turn that over.
So you talked about the anomalies there, and for example, on the core ops side, the monitoring and the observability side, we have been generating anomaly alerts for some time. I'm just trying to see, is that what you were alluding to on the service side as well? So we do generate those alerts right from the infra CI to the broader service CI, and then we're able to track that down to the prediction that we make, and then how that. So we're able to do that and show some dashboards during the session we have it. But were you looking at the same from a service?
So I've been tossing this around for a while, and the reason why I don't want to use a nomenclature that we already have is because there are very specific kind of organizational like attachments, like we know what an alert is. It's going to let us know that something happened. What I'm talking about is a loop that happens, anomaly, identification of a recommendation and implementing that in order to prevent an outage from occurring, all being owned by technology. So at the front of it, we may have an alert or an anomaly that triggers an alert, right? We have this path for event management that has always existed. This is slightly different. I don't want to call it an event because I don't want to loop it in with all the stuff that we do with monitoring. It's different. So coming up with the right nomenclature that is different enough, that doesn't fall into the traditional buckets so that people can understand we're dealing with a loop now that is new, that is not an event, it's not an alert, it's not an incident. I think it's important, especially from the back-end system perspective, that we are tracking and have full auditability about where those recommendations and those decisions are coming from.
Yeah.
And so by having a separate class and tracking it differently, I just feel like that's needed.
Well, absolutely. And again, we do so. We did run into that dilemma as well with customers because the anomalies with the core monitoring and ops have been around for some time now.
Yep.
Have been using that, and there was an expectation of their handling and reporting slightly differently than what would be for a typical alert, which is not generated by the be it a statistical or an ML model in there. And so yes, internally, even on the ops side, we try to tag it differently. I mean, the label is still an event, if I may, but it's tagged differently and you could report. But I think it's a very fair point.
The one that's the closest definition to me is an incident, because remember, the definition of an incident is the disruption or degradation, something that could be a future disruption. But putting it into the incident bucket, again, is that really an incident? I just feel like we need a separate category for tracking it and measuring it long term. Especially with the human in the loop, it's not as important. But when the human is out of the loop and we're trusting the system enough to do that auditability to knowing that that was a fully closed loop, alerts and events are like, they happen all the time. We get a lot of noise from those. A lot of times we don't have to take any action. But this is definitely some sort of action is involved in there. That was one of the terms I was thinking of using as an AI action. Track it that way. And then again, this is a picture of a journey map. And again, I'm really trying to emphasize this. Transformation takes time. And so, for example, in this one, we have a traditional problem in operations, which is, we've been doing more with less for a really long time. Incident volumes continue to increase, but we don't have enough people. Well, we know we're not going to get any more people, so how do we solve this? Well, self-service is one of those things that we've always looked at. So maybe our approach is to automate as much as we possibly can. So how do we go about that? Well, let's take the top 10 recurring things, identify 5 of the most important, put some automations in place, but are we going to get to our ultimate goal of increased productivity overnight? It could take months for this to happen, and oh, by the way, you may have some really significant problems that you're not seeing because you're focused on this metric. So our early signs, page views. If people are not going to the automation, they can't use it. So if you're not getting the page views, you have a marketing problem. Now you market it. Can people find it? Maybe you go talk to customers and you find out that nobody understands what you're talking about on the portal. They're not going to the automation. Once you get the page views, they're going up. Then you should see the impact of the incidents in that specific category type item go down. Now we have 2 effects that we're measuring. They're going there, they're getting results. Now we can see an increase or 2% reduction of work in the queues, and then we get to the productivity over the next 6 months. So it's important as you're adopting these technologies to think about measurement in a progression. What are the early signs that we've got adoption? What are the early signs that it's making an impact on the work environment? Don't just think about the cost savings or the minute savings that you might be getting. It may take you a while to get there. Hopefully not, but it is important for us to think about these as a journey of metrics as opposed to just one North Star that we're focused on. All right, skill sets. I mean, I've already talked a little bit about, I know this is a really busy slide. Don't worry, you guys will all get a copy of the PDF. I'll make it available to everyone. But our skill sets are definitely changing. It's not just that we need people with more technical troubleshooting capabilities. They also need to be able to build automations. They need to be able to understand drift. They need to be able to understand when it's building bias. These are skill sets that I guarantee you support staff can gain these skill sets, right? The ability to look at a model, especially if you've been doing a lot of knowledge management curation, the whole process around managing knowledge and understanding the importance of knowledge to the success of the organization. That knowledge is just important for the AI. It's a natural transition for an organization to begin making that pivot. Now, these are not the technical engineers that are going to be behind the scenes building stuff, but they can pay attention to the AI and have really good tools in place to help them understand the effectiveness of it and to make slight modifications that are needed along the way or build baseline automations. The skill sets, it's really important for us to understand it's not just our IT staff. We're talking about executives. We're talking about general business users. The point that Ryan brought up earlier about our inability to take advantage of something like prompt engineering on the business side because people don't understand how to write business prompts. Training needs to be across the organization for us to be successful with this. Just like we've invested in training over the years for leadership skills and management skills and technology skills, this is at the core of what we're doing moving forward. Do you envision a future where AI is not going to be more a part of what we do in the work environment or less? Right? The sooner we start training our people across the board, the sooner that they're going to be able to take advantage of these technologies. And at the heart of it is also the trust factor. If you're using a technology and it's working in an effective way, meaning I have the skills to understand how to use it, it's not English, right? It may look like it's English, but it's still not English translated into code. There's still a little bit of a gap there. So the better that I can understand how to use these technologies, the more that I can craft the right way to use it, the better the results that I'm going to get. So training across the board. And you also have to be focused on building knowledge capacity. Where you traditionally have really good knowledge is within the service desk realm, because you get questions and you have answers. But knowledge is across the enterprise. You have developer knowledge in commenting, product manuals, testing scripts. This is all knowledge that's at the core of what product engineers do. How are you tracking that? How can that be used in something like vibe coding, right? Our ability to capture how we do things within our organization is so critically important to fine-tuning these engines to work effectively in our environment. So be focused on building your knowledge capacity. And then, of course, the technology layer is quite substantial. I'm going to talk a little bit one more time about the AI ops part of this. One of the reasons why this wave was very different. Instead of asking product vendors, do you do incident management? Do you do change management? I know across the board, every single vendor in the ESM space does incident change problem, right? This is core functionality based off of ITIL that these products have had for a long time. What I want to know is how are you bringing in the data from AI ops? How are you bringing in observability and helping to manage services more effectively? How are you bringing in DEX and endpoint management in order to understand and drive better service delivery? So what I did in the evaluation was looked at all the edge use cases. I didn't understand at the time how ridiculously hard that was going to be, both on myself and the vendors, because I'm essentially looking at all these other areas and saying, show me how your product does that. Each one of those has a separate wave where they dive into great detail with that. But the results were really positive. Being able to see how vendors distinguish themselves, it completely changed the order of the vendors in the results that came out of it. Not going to give away where BMC was, but just saying, it is definitely different. And that's because the holistic view is about getting data from all of these different technologies across our landscape and bringing them in to create better service delivery. So that's pretty much all I have for you guys here today. Any questions, comments, feedback?
I think one of the good things is the bit you're pulling out that we're starting to see as well, we need to focus on, is it's the people that are using it. It's not just, there's a lot more around it. That technology gives one level, but you've got to think wider and differently and bring people on that journey. And I think that was quite clear in some of your slides as well. You've got the employee piece in there, bringing it to them, bringing them in, and understanding there's different levels of it. So yeah, it's encouraging to see that sort of like, I think we're on that, starting on that journey, but it is wider than just.
I haven't seen anything in my 30 years that has been so transformative to everything that we're doing. It's not just about the technology advancing in a particular way, but if I look at ITIL, or ITIL version 4 even, right? I'm standing here, I'm looking at something that I invested a significant amount of my career in studying and helping organizations with, and I'm thinking, is that really the way forward now, right? I don't have that same confidence that that's what's going to move us forward. So the models, the methods, the measurements, we have to rethink everything and be prepared and ready for that future, because it's definitely going to look a lot different. Yes?
And if I may add, coming from a different function, it's actually across your organizations. I'm heading the legal department at Helix, and I'm going through exactly the same, issues with regard to, how do I get the lawyers to actually grasp on that new technology and add that to their work stream. It's typically an organization that we've asked to do much more with much less. I think probably across all of your organizations, and I totally agree with you. I'm really trying to drive transform the angst that some have with regard to, this is going to translate into layoffs, into, no. This is going to translate into you being able to add the value that you've been trained for, so that all the little admin stuff and easy tasks that you can delegate to in the past, probably 50 years ago, we really had an assistant or secretary. Remember that in those days that we've never really lived through. This is going to be helping you just develop on your expertise and add more value to the organization, but also, and I totally agree with you, breathe, take some, because we really have reached in some departments a level for which you just can't ask them to do that. You're going to break the whole organization itself if you don't give them that, allow them to take that just second, or they're going to just be breathing, just realizing what they've done, where they fit into the organization, what they have achieved so far and everything, just so that they feel good for once. So totally agree with, very relevant to all the departments.
I was involved in a TEI study that looked at the use of AI in law firms. And it was quite interesting because law firms, right, you can pretty much determine, you have revenue that's generated by lawyers by an hour. So when you start talking about productivity gains, you can translate that into revenue quite quickly, more billable time. But what they were able to do was transition some of their work, because they're optimized to do as much as they can on a billable rate perspective, to more of an assistant to the lawyer. I can't remember the job title. But more of that work could be transferred over and have greater confidence that the work would be done at the right level, so that the lawyers could turn that task over to more of an administrative role. And the numbers were significant. Very interesting. The transformations are just, I've never seen anything like this, ever. And it's not slowing down. It's not going away. I do want to make one comment, the difference between the US and Europe. One of the things that I saw coming out of the wave is that the vendors that are based in Europe that are dealing with all these new laws and regulations and guidelines that are coming out, their products are behind. They absolutely are. I get it. We're being cautious. We're being careful. We've got all these laws and regulations. There's a reason for you to be a little bit kind of checked and balanced as you're moving forward with progress. But the gap between those products and what I'm seeing being released from the US is expanding because of it. So, there's a kind of a cautionary tale of, yes, I understand that we need all of this governance, but it can't get in the way of innovation to the extent that it's slowing down that innovation to that drastic point. I get it. I've worked in government a lot in my life, and I know and understand data privacy. I understand that. It's also creating a lot of nationalism in Europe, meaning let's buy inside our country first, in Europe second, and then we'll consider putting something into the US market as a last alternative if we can't find it. So it's driving change, but there's a cautionary note there that the gap has grown significantly since agentic came out, quite significantly. Anyway, that's all I have. A lot of new research there. We're trying as fast as we can to stay in front of this, but it's fast moving.